So I'm going to start this deal. Okay. So let's kind of plow ahead here, going to the next assignment. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no worries. Okay. So if you come to the class website, you can grab what you need for assignment 4. And so here we'll download. And so just as a reminder, kind of how you import Unity packages, if you come up to Assets, and then if you import package, so I have it on the download, let's say download, so you can just say open. So all mine are already in here, but when you pull it up, just go ahead and select everything. But what it adds, it's going to add a few things for you. So one thing you'll notice will be the UI, and so as part of the assignment, we're going to have it now where you can have a reticle that you can use to focus on things you want to destroy in the environment. So we put a little reticle in there for you to do that. Along with that, we have the this Sparks prefab, and I'll get into a little bit about this is a particle system that you can use to show when things are getting damaged, and I'll go into some more detail on how this kind of particle system works, and if you want to modify it, how you can go about doing that. But along with that, you'll get a set of scripts. You'll get this destroyable script. You'll get this pickup script, and these 2 item scripts, and a use equipment script. So the use equipment, this is the one that does the bulk of the work with regards to being able to select blocks that you want to break apart, along with being able to queue up an item to use. And so this just ties onto the character. So I'm just going to add it as a component onto the character. So let me bring up. Okay. So what use equipment has? So you can see the values it has here. So it has this aim object, its range, Sparks prefab, time between hits, and things like that. So let's take a little closer look as to what else is going into here. And so really what we're doing within this is that we're trying to determine what the mouse is highlighting at any given point. And if it's highlighting something that we want to be able to target to break apart, that's where this is getting called. So in here, really what's happening in here is that we're taking the mouse position, we're drawing a line between the mouse and the character, so then we can see kind of where they're pointing. And then within here, what is that we're doing is that we're doing this ray cast. And so a ray cast, if you remember kind of like a ray from geometry, a ray is just a point that then has a line that's coming out of it. And so it's going in one direction. And so what we're doing with this ray cast is we're casting out a ray from the position of the character, and we're heading in the direction that we're pointing, and we're seeing, are we hitting anything that we can target, or what we've deemed as targetable? And if we do that, then, and we can do another hit, then we call this hit target. That's within the script. The hitting is tied to the left mouse button, so that's where we get this get mouse button 0. And you can notice here that this is a get mouse button rather than get mouse button down. So that means you can just kind of hold the mouse button, and it'll just keep. That's what it uses to check. So it's not looking for clicks; it's just looking to see whether or not you're holding it down. But here it gets mouse button down, so this is a particular click, and so this is where we call the use item. So I'm going to take a step back because I want to get into kind of setting this up with regards to aiming. So like I said, we need to have, so to start this off, we need to have some kind of object set up where we can target items in the world. So we're going to make a new object. So I'm just going to make an empty object. I'm going to call this it's kind of like my aim object. And really this just needs to have kind of one other component, just the sprite renderer. And so I'm going to load up the mouse cursor to put in there. And so let's see, I'm going to move this so you can kind of see a little bit better. So you see it's kind of hidden behind the tree. So everything with regards to sorting layers and where it appears in the sorted layer still applies. So I need to set this to the foreground, and if I increase this number, then it becomes more prominent. So I want to make sure this is stands out above the things we want to target. So I'm going to move it, say 3 or 4 in the layer. Now, because I said this is going to be associated with the character, I really want to have this as a child object of the character. So if I move it here, now its position is relative to the character. And actually, I want to make this aim object a little bit smaller because it's pretty massive right now. So I'm going to set it to like 0.5 and 0.5. So that looks a little bit better. So now if I come back to the use equipment, so if I set that now to my object I just created, so that now serves as our aim object. So the targeting, like I said, the targeting dealt with what do we want to check within the world that we want to deem as a target. And so if we come back to our layers, I said you have kind of these set of layers that are available for free to use. So right now all of our tiles are set to ground, so I can set it to ground. But you could also have, say for instance, if you put in kind of like different boxes, like loot boxes or other things that you don't necessarily want to have, you don't want to necessarily define as ground, you just want to define as its own kind of particular layer. What you can do is if you come up to layers, if you come up here, if you remember, if you want to add layers, you just come to your object, and here under layers you can create a new layer. So if we had, say like loot as a layer, and if I come back to here, so now under the use equipment, so now when I click on it, it says mixed, and it's because now it's saying I can target things that are on the ground, but I can also target things that we've put on the loot layer. So like I said, you can kind of play with this however you want. So just kind of get started. If you're just trying to break apart, say like tiles in the world, probably the easiest thing to do is just kind of set target to ground. So I'm just going to leave that off for now. The Sparks prefab, like I said, that's something that I've provided. You can just kind of load that in as a prefab, and I'll get into a little bit more discussion on how you can modify the prefab. And so if I start playing, so you can see my mouse is moving around, and it's bounded. And this bounding is coming from the range. And so if I change this range such that, say if I put it to like 0.25, now if I come back, so now I have a tighter bound with the with the reticle. So you can play around kind of where you want to put this, or how far out you want to put it. So I'm going to kind of split the difference, put it at 0.5. So that looks pretty good. And so you can see it kind of moves around, and then when I hit the ground, it stops. It doesn't move down further. So if I were to take this off, now you can see it moves all over.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important when like browser games, because then you don't want to accidentally it'll let you know when you accidentally get like outside of the game.
Yeah, and so I mean, really, with the idea for the target, so really this is just to highlight that with that raycast, what it's doing is that it's looking to see when it collides with something on a layer that we've deemed as targetable, and when it does, that reticle stops. So since we have nothing targeted, then it's allowed to kind of move freely. But then once I set it to the ground layer, now when I move it, it's not going to go beyond anything that we've targeted as or put on the target layer, which in this case is the ground. And so the other two values here is time between hits and damage. So this gets into when we start breaking objects apart, kind of how quickly you can break it apart, and kind of what we're deeming as damage points. So how many damage points you deal out on every hit. Okay, so we got the use equipment set up. So that, like I said, there's more that goes into the use equipment, and I'll highlight some of the pieces that are kind of important for the assignment that you need to understand. So I'm gonna clear out that stuff. But let's move on. So let's get into actually like breaking objects. And so, like I said, really for the assignment, what we're looking for is being able to have tiles or objects that are in the world that you want to break apart. And so for Terraria, I said you can treat the world as this set of tiles, and then you can start breaking apart tiles as you click on them. So I'm going to go ahead. I come to prefab. So like I said, so since all the tiles in here are prefabs, I can add components onto the prefabs, and that will be applicable to everything that's already instantiated in our scene. So here, I'm going to add a component. So I'm going to add this destroyable script. So what goes into our destroyable script? So when you download it, this is what you'll be provided. So you can see we have this public variable, and so that's max hit points. And so this defines how many hit points this this target or this item has. And so every time we hit an object, then we're going to take away from this other value, this current hit points. And so current hit points, so this tracks how many hit points the object presently has. So you can see when the game starts, for any object that has a destroyable script, we start off by setting the current hit points to the max hit points. So this currently starts with a value of 100. And then we have this take damage call. And so really where that take damage happens, if I come back to hit target, so this is back in the use equipment. So when we know that we're going to hit the target, so when we're clicking the button and we're within the threshold of when we can hit next, at that point we call this hit target. And so what's happening here? So it's checking to see what our mouse is colliding with, and then it's trying to grab a destroyable component on that. And if it has a destroyable component, then it's going to make sparks. So that's where this instantiate comes from. And then it's going to call the take damage function within our destroyable script. So that's where take damage is getting called. And so I'll explain a little bit more about instantiate as we start building out destroyable. So along with that, we then have this collectible prefabs. And this ends up being an array of, this is set as transforms, but you can think of it as kind of an array of prefabs. And so once you break apart the block, you want to be able to create any number of prefabs that you have in this array. So any block, because this is an array, you can have more than one value in there. And so we can create multiple pickup items by breaking apart just a single block. So really, however you want to, so this allows you, to be able to kind of play around if you want to have blocks that, only produce a single item or blocks that produce multiple items. This gives you some leeway to do that. Okay. So now, let's get into kind of this take damage. So this is the part for your assignment that you need to implement. And so I've kind of commented here, what you need to do. So when we hit something, the first thing we need to do is decrement the kind of the hit points that the block has. And so we have this current hit points value. And so if you remember to decrease the value, you can do it one of two ways. You can either say current hit points equals the current value of that minus, let's say, damage. Or kind of the shorthand way to do it is if you said minus equal, whoops, and you set that to damage. And so here, now it's going to decrement current hit points by the damage value. So the first thing we do when we take damage is decrease the hit points. And so the next part is now it's saying we need to make the check to see if our hit point value, if it's less than or equal to 0. And so if you remember to do a conditional, it's if, and then say current hit points, and we can do less than, and so if you may have seen less than already, so less than 0 would be this. But if you want it to be such that you want to see if it's equates to 0 or less than 0, you would do this less than equal to. I'm going to move this so it's in there. Okay. So in this block, this is where we're going to start putting in all the code for being able to create instances and be able to destroy the block. And so here, I said this collectible prefab. So I said we store all the prefabs that we have within here. And so, so the first thing I'll do, first I'll just make sure that this has been this has been instantiated. So if collectible prefabs does not equal null. So this will ensure that we at least have one value within this array. And so we haven't really, whoops, I'm going to move this back. So we haven't talked a whole lot about arrays or how to use loops with arrays. So you can think of array as just a list of items that you can have within it. And so you can use a loop to iterate over that list to then look at every item that you have in that array. And so kind of a way to do that within C# is to use a for loop. So if I say for, whoops, ignore that. So for, and there's a couple ways you can do for loops. One is to iterate over a set of numbers. The other way is just to look at every single item that you have in the list. And so if I wanted to do something like that, I could say for transform next item I believe I have to say in collectible prefabs. So it's not happy about the for. Oh, so the syntax there for each expected. Okay, so what's happening here is now it's saying for each item, and so I set. So the way that the syntax is that so collectible transform. This is an array of, collectible prefabs. This is an array of transforms, and so transform is the variable type. And so I say, so here I'm going to take the next transform that's within collectible prefabs, and so it's going to go through each transform in that list and then do something with it. So that's how we iterate across the different items in the array. So the next part here, so this is now we're going to create an instance of the prefab. And so you've had experience already with instantiating objects in the world. It's just you haven't done it in code. So like I said, whenever we, if I come back to our scene, and so if you were to drop a prefab, so like I have this apple I was playing with, I make an apple. Now that apple prefab, that's been instantiated in the world. So now I have an apple object that exists in my game. And I did that just by dragging it into the scene. And so really when we want to do that in code, so we want to do something like that similarly in code. So I'm going to remove that. And so the way that we do that is through this instantiate call. And so if I say instantiate, and if you look at the IntelliSense, it gives you a multitude of ways that you can instantiate this. Like I said, you can instantiate this object. So really, what we want to do is we want to provide. Really, what we're trying to do here is we want to provide the object or kind of the object we want to create, which is going to be that prefab that we put in there. Then we're going to give it the position where we want it to appear in the world, and we want to give it a rotation, so how it's going to be oriented. So I'm going to borrow some code I wrote earlier. And explain what's going on, because it's just a lot to type. And so here I'm going to set. So instantiate. So I want to give it the item I want to create, which in here is this next item, and then I want to give it a position. So I'm getting ahead of myself here because now it's asking for kind of different piece. So because really what you want. So let me probably back up a bit. if I were to do something like this, this is totally legal. And so what it says here is that I want to instantiate this prefab. So in my list, I'm going to instantiate this. I'm going to put it where my player is, or I'm sorry, where the block is that I'm breaking apart. And then I'm just going to not mess with the rotation. I'm just going to leave it as it's by default, which is this quaternion identity. So this, you could do something like this and it's totally fine. The problem that you may run into is that you break apart, you may break apart the block, and then if you have, say, like multiple items, or especially if you have multiple items, they'll all start stacking on top of each other. And so you kind of want to break, so if you have multiple items, you want to kind of appear in different places such that you're not stacking them all on top of one another. And so you can add in a little randomization in order to make that happen. And so that's where some of that additional code that you saw was coming into play. And so what I'm going to copy this because it's, like I said, it's a little much. But what I can do, and so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to add a little randomization to the transform, or to the position. And so what it's doing is that it's trying to find, it's creating this value that's based upon the size of the object, and then multiplying it by multiplying that by half, and then it's picking a value that's within inside, and so this random inside unit circle, all this does is give you a vector 2 value that would be within, say, a unit circle. So it goes from -1 to 1. But here it's barfing because it doesn't understand what this is. And really what I wanted to do here was to get the size of the object that we want to produce, and then use that as the basis. So we're only moving it just as with the bounding being the size of the object. And so I can do that by grabbing the collider. So let's say collider 2D COL. And if you don't have, I think all you now have experience with this, but if you don't, or what I'm doing here, so I'm looking at the prefab of our pickup item, and I'm checking to see, I want to grab a collider, a 2D collider that's attached to that prefab. And so your pickup item should have some collider associated with it, and you'll definitely do that if you want to figure out whether or not your character's running over to pick it up. But anyway, so what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the collider, and so because it's collider 2D, it doesn't care if it's a box collider, a capsule collider, a polygon collider, as long as it's based upon the collider, the base class, which is collider 2D. So this gets back to when we're talking about object-oriented programming. You can have this parent class and then children that derive from it. So in this case, collider 2D is the base, and then you can derive different classes from that, like a box or a capsule or a polygon. So it doesn't matter what kind of collider you put on it, as long as it's a variety of the 2D collider. And so so kind of really what this is doing is that it's creating, so we grab the collider, and then here we're using that to help randomize, or help build kind of a random number that then we apply to the position of what this component is tied to, which is the object we're breaking apart, and then that's where we're going to put the pickup item. And so because we're going to make an item, but now we need to destroy the block itself. So we need to destroy the block that we're getting this item out of. So that's the other part, or kind of the other function I want to talk about, is this destroy function that Uni provides. And so what Uni does with this is that it effectively removes the game object from the game. So really, like I said, because we're attaching this to items that we're breaking apart, like we want the block that this is tied to disappear. And so within your script, if you want to access the game object this is tied to, it's this game object. So with the lowercase g and capital O right here. So that should destroy the object. So I'm going to come back, make sure this builds A-OK. And it looks like it did. So now what I'll do, so I'm just going to focus on these top layer tiles for now. So I said I have this destroyable script, but I need to give it some I want to have something produce from it. And so for right now, I'm going to delete these two things because I want to walk you through kind of how to do that. So I said, right now, you can produce kind of any kind of prefab that you want. So I'm just going to make a prefab of just some object, just so I can at least see it being created in the world. And so what I'll do, if I come look at sprites and say forest, like I said, we have all this junk in here. So there's like this wood block. This wood block, or this little ground block. So I'm going to make this little mud block. And so if you want to make a prefab object, an easy way to do that, I just create an empty object in the world. I'm going to call this my mud block. And I'm going to give it a sprite. And for now, I'm going to use that ground. There we go, that ground block. And again, I got to put it somewhere we can see it. So I'm going to put it on the same layer as the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a rigid body. And I'm going to give it a box collider. Just because I know it's going to be something that we want to be able to kind of just fall into the ground, and something that the character can run into. But now that I have that, I'm just going to come back into the environment. I'm just going to drag this. So now, because I put it into that prefab directory, you can see now this is going blue. And so now it's established as a prefab. So I can make all sorts of instances of this object. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this because I don't need it in the scene. I'm going to instantiate it within the script. So if you want to set value, if you want to set an array value within the editor, so right now we have a size 0, so I can expand the size. Say if I expand it to 1, and now I have 1 element. And if I wanted, say, like 3 items, now I get 3 slots I can fill. And likewise, you can have as many as your heart's content. So let's just start for now with just 1. So I'm going to put that mud block in there as the 1. So right now my max hit points are 10. Let's see. And so if I come back, say the character, this use equipment, I have this damage 10. So how many clicks do I need to do in order to break a block apart?
If you're just doing 1 damage, 10. If you're doing 2, 5.
Right. So I need to do, so because this damage is 10 and the hit points for these blocks are 100, I need to do 10 clicks in order to break it apart. And so you can tweak that based upon, so you can tweak kind of what you want. If you want the time between hits to be shorter, or you want the damage to be larger by, say, the player, or if you want your objects to withstand kind of different abuse. So in this case, I'm going to set this to 20, just so after 2 clicks, it should break apart. So I'm going to go ahead and start running. So because I have that spark prefab, so it's just running that little particle effect. So that's why you get the little sparks. But now I get this little like block booger just kind of sitting there. And so sit there and run over it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this will end up turning into an item that we can pick up. And so we'll go into some of the pickup stuff a little bit later. Let's see. I said, are y'all good? Like, I know it's uncomfortably warm in here. I don't know if y'all want to just like call class early, or if you want to keep going, because we can definitely cover everything for the assignment on Thursday.
And go over what's going to be on the test.
Potentially. So just get like, are y'all good or? Okay. So, excellent.
And you can catch up.
Yes. Okay. So, right on. Well, all right. Given that y'all are being such troopers, let's talk about the kind of the damage you can. So, showing the kind of progressive damage you can do for the destroyable block. So, as part of the extra credit, you can show, say, like the block kind of falling apart as you keep hitting it, and then
kind of like in Minecraft when you like are digging something that it starts to fade away and then it destroys itself.
Yeah.
Not like that. I get it.
Yeah. So in order to do that, we have to go back and kind of modify some of the destroyable script to then kind of be able to have those sprites that we want to show for the progression, and then set up the code to destroy it. So, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to open up the destroyable. Oops. All right. And so in here, I'm going to set up just a few public variables. So if you want to access a 2D, let's say a 2D object that you'd see in the game, you would use sprite. There's another 2D object for UI elements that we'll get into a little bit later. So just bear in mind there's a differentiation between items that show up in the world or in the game, and then items that show up in the UI layer. So here I'll have I'll call it, say, like quarter damage. Half damage. And 3/4 damage. And so we'll do it such that, we'll break it up into kind of four parts. So, you'll show it a little bit, like I said, once it drops, say 25% of the hit points, then we'll show the quarter damage. If we go more than half the hit points taken away, we'll do the half damage. And then when we're at 75% damage, we'll show the 3/4 one. So here we'll say if damage is more than say more than a quarter. So what we can do, so we take away the, can you all see, or do I need to dim the lights again? I'm going to dim the lights. Okay. So so I want to see what the hit point, so the hit points, if I want to see if it's less than, if it's only been a quarter damaged. And so, well, actually, probably what I want to do is start with 3/4 and then go from there. And that should make sense to you when I start putting this together. So, so damage is more than 75%. And so what I can do, so we already know what the maximum hit points are, because we define that as a public variable. So then what we can do is, if we want to know, what 75% damage would be, we then can just we can then take that max and multiply it by 0.75, and then that will tell us what 3/4 damage would look like. So if I said something, or if I did something where I say 0.75 multiplied by max. So if our current hit points, if it's less than, say, oh, really, this should be 0.25. Yeah. So and the reason being is that this will give us, so we want a quarter of the max hit points. And so if our current is less than, say, really this ends up being 1/4 of the max hit points, then we know this is at 75%. And so what we want to do is just change the sprite that we have tied to the destroyable object to kind of the sprite that we have for the defined level. So what we can do is here, so first what we can do is get the sprite renderer, because if you remember, if I come back to Unity, sprite renderer is the component that controls the sprite, and all we're really going to do is just we're just going to change the sprite value here within the script. So if I said sprite renderer, call it renderer, and I am just going to grab this off our component, off our game object. So I can say render sprite, and now I can set what the sprite is going to be. And I want this to be the 3/4 damage sprite. Okay. And now I can go through the different levels. So now if, say, current hit points is half, I want something to happen. And then else if current hit points 0.75F. Okay, so let's make sure this logic works. So if my current hit points, if this is a quarter, of which should be, then I get a 3/4 damage. Then I'm saying that's not true. Let's look at half. And that's not true. Let's look at it at a quarter. So would this fly? So if I said, so in this case, if we're, say we're at, so right now we only set this to be a max of 20. We're breaking apart at 10. So this isn't going to be a really good example. So probably what we need to do, we'll change that probably in the in the editor. So if we start, say, with like 40, and we knock it off 1, so that's 30. And so if 30, and then so if we said this is 40, so if 30 is less than, say, max hit points 0.25 times a quarter, if that's less than 10, then we want the 3/4 damage, and that's not the case. And then here for max hit points for half, and we can just go ahead and just add in this, so we'll call this half damage, and then, oops, sprite, quarter damage. Yeah, so we start, say we hit it once, and then so at that point it goes, this would be 30. So 0.25 times 40, that's 10. So that wouldn't be true. Here, max hit points times 0.5, this would be 20. So 30 is not less than 20. So that wouldn't be true. And then here, 30, so 0.75. And actually, that wouldn't be true because it would be equal to. So we can actually make these less than or equal to put us on. I'm going to change these. I'm going to write those in to make a little bit more sense. So if damage is more than 75%, if damage is more than 50%, if damage is more than 25%. Whoop. Okay. So this should swap out, I said, the sprites as we take damage. And so let's go back. So make sure this compiles okay. It looks like it compiled all right. And now, so now I have these values here: quarter damage, half damage, 3/4 damage. So I just need to give sprites to each of these. And so I can do, say, in the top. So if you look at the tiles that were provided, there's these different tile sets. And so in here, so that's rainy, sunny, yeah. So if I look in here, so you have like kind of these different tile sets within here. So So I'm going to go back. Let's click on. I'm just going to highlight one of the tiles in here. So let's see. So I just want to find these just use these tiles for now. So for instance, say that quarter damage, maybe it's that. So it has a little grass to it. Let's see half damage. There's no grass, and then this looks like pretty busted up. So let's use something like that. And then let's say right now I've highlighted just one of the tiles in here, and so if I hit apply, so now that updates all of the prefabs. So now if I look at any of these tiles, they all have the same value now associated with that. So I'm going to go ahead and start running. Oh, wait, before I do that, I want to change the hit points. So let's change it to, say, 40. So we can at least try to see the different progressions as they go through. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead. So I applied it, and now I'm going to run. So if I hit once, so you can see now it looks a little goofy. Now it looks a little damaged, a little more busted up. Now I get my little nugget I can play with. Yay! All right, so that covers, like I said, doing the damage for destroyable objects. So that's the end of class. So we'll go into doing how to pick up items, how to attach, and then how to be able to use items later.